on, everybody? It's boy Steiner here with another episode of Secondhand Talent. We have with us our wonderful guest, Eric Frutchey of Pixelate Productions, a freelance light director. Eric, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, man. It's good to be here.
Happy to have you on. Before we get started with the interview, thank you as always to Tenacious Toys for the lovely desk candy. We love having it around. And you can get some yourself if you want, or if you like pins and patches, you could head over to secondhandtalent.com and grab some of those. In the meantime, though, we got some talking to do. So, Eric, first of all, you're the first light director that we've had the privilege to have on Secondhand Talent,
Awesome, man.
which is pretty cool if you think about it. I mean, we've covered a lot of aspects of Secondhand Talent so far, and just when I think I know all of the other aspects that I want to highlight, I learn of more. But we met at a Munyon concert
Yeah.
in the Chicago suburbs, where you lit them up. And was that your first time seeing Munyon?
No. So I've been seeing Munyon since probably around their start.
So about
Like
2015, 2016
yeah,
ish.
it actually goes
Okay.
a little bit back. Like I had seen Joe's old band, The Coop. They actually played
I used to work with them actually. If our attentive viewers know that in April, to celebrate a year of the podcast, we had interviews with every member of the Coop to
nice. That's
celebrate.
awesome.
I used to be on the road with them.
Nice. Did
Um,
not know that.
and that oh yeah, well that's how I know Joe.
Sure.
Um, it was in either last week's episode or 2 weeks before, sometime in April. I haven't figured that one out quite yet, but yeah, it's amazing. It's really wonderful that um I have the privilege of having these guys on, and the coolest part is Danny, who at the time of this recording, uh I'm I interviewed yesterday. Um, he was our very first interview for
Nice.
Secondhand Talent in our second episode. He's our very first repeat guest.
That's
So that's
awesome.
also that's also a pretty cool thing. And then we hit 50 episodes coming up in a few weeks, June 5th.
That's great.
So pretty wild. So that
Yeah.
well
So
anyway, that's how I'm
yeah.
connected to Munyon. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I didn't know anyone, I'd actually back in the day, I used to DJ, and I DJ'd this small festival in my hometown in Muskegon, Michigan, called Jamma Whamma, and the Coop was the headlining band, and we played on the same day, and they played their set after I finished with mine. So that was my first introduction,
You know what year
technically,
that
to Joe.
was?
There, I think it was 2013.
Yep. Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Or
So then fast
2012
forward a
maybe.
couple years, and I believe my first Munyon show was at summer camp. Um,
Right on.
at the campfire stage. And I'd seen him, multiple times from that point on through up to 2020, 2021. I've seen him open for talk. I've seen him play solo shows, seen him a couple times at Bell's, saw him in Grand Rapids. Just a fan of their music, right?
Yeah.
And like I mentioned to you earlier, I used to have a podcast of my own with Nate Purchase, also
Oh
from
yeah. Oh,
Michigan.
you
Oh, do you
didn't
know
tell.
Nate?
You said Nate. You didn't say it was Nate Purchase. Sure, of course. He's a
So
great
yeah,
photographer.
yeah, me and Nate used to have our own podcast called Life
Ah,
Through
I didn't
Music.
know you were that. Shout out Nate.
Yeah,
What's
shout
up,
out to
buddy?
Nate
Long
Dog.
time.
Um, and we actually had Munyon on our show at Cowpie Music Festival. We brought the podcast on the road with us and put it in an RV
I
and
think I
interviewed people.
remember that.
Okay, that's funny. Yeah, that was I was the co-host on that show. It
I
was a
re-
late night.
I remember that.
That's a funny episode. All that stuff's still on Spotify too, so
Wow.
you can go back and listen to it when you're done if
Whoa,
you
that
want.
was a long time ago.
Yeah, man.
Wow.
The 2018 or 19, 2019. Anyway, so no, that wasn't my first time seeing Munyon, but that was my second time doing lights for them. It was at the show I met you at.
Okay. And at the first show, did you have the same equipment that you had at your disposal at the second show?
Close, I think pretty much every time. I do a big gig, I usually end up upgrading something beforehand. But I think most of the lights were in use at my first show, but it was a much smaller venue, so I'm pretty sure it was a little more stripped down because I couldn't fit everything.
So you say it was stripped down, but as I mean, I got a Munyon grinder right here. Um, as you know, an avid, you know, not just their friend, also a big fan of the music. Absolutely love it. Um, it's shit. I lost my train of thought.
All good.
Um,
We're talking about a stripped down setup.
that was the sneeze. The sneeze threw me off. Um, strip strip down
So
setup
you
of.
had asked if the equipment I used for the show you were at was
Oh yeah, yeah, okay, oh,
the
got it,
same
got
equipment
it.
as I used it the first time I did lights for them. The answer to that's like probably 85-90% of the same equipment. I think I had a couple brand new lights that I actually used for the first time at that Zero Fest show that we met.
Well, the reason I ask is because um I was very impressed.
Thank you.
Um it was I mean it was it was a combination of the the type of lights that you were using, how you were utilizing them, and setting. Where so just for context, so our audience has some. This was a little street festival. So we were on avenue in between, townhomes and buildings and
Hmm.
things of that nature. There's apartment buildings to the right and restaurants to the left and the whole town behind us. And the lights going across. I don't know if you were ever looking behind you,
Oh
but
yeah, I was looking.
yeah, it was spectacular. And this was a family friendly event. And so it was so often you look around and you see like a kid in the audience and they're just
Just like,
looking up at the lights. And it's an awesome thing to see.
oh yeah,
And I was very impressed. So I came up and introduced myself afterwards. And I've been looking forward to having you on ever since because I want to know how you got into being an LD.
sure.
Because you
I'll
say
quite,
that
yeah. Go ahead.
little improvements every time, but that means you've been scaling up.
Yeah, no, so it's been a fast scale up. I'll quick talk about that show too, because that was by far the most challenging show I've done. Um,
It was
because
great,
it
like
was,
genuinely. It
thank you.
was,
The fact that it was outdoors that was a new thing for me. It was my first time doing an outdoor show. Um, and in talking about the gear that I have, it is not the same, it is not the level of the lights that you'd see in a theater, right? It's a smaller they're smaller lights, they're less bright.
okay.
They work great for small clubs and stuff, which is what I've done up until this point, but I was nervous taking them into an outdoor space, because I'm limited to what I have at my disposal, and
Of course.
you can't control things like wind, and I don't have
Well,
foggers that are built for that sort of thing.
when power surges, I mean,
Right,
there's
all
we're
sorts of
really,
things.
as we've talked on this show so many times about being in a position such as an LD, like if you're front of house or a stage manager or, um, really in any position where you have responsibilities during the show, like there's, so many things could just happen that are nobody's fault
Yeah,
that, that you can prepare for all you want, but they're not so easy to mitigate once they happen.
yeah. And the cool thing about that experience was I had to kind of on the fly figure out how to utilize my lights in a way, because the stand, like you couldn't see the beams the whole time, and that's all fine, but it challenged me to use my surroundings, like the trees to the outside
Mm.
of the stage and
So you
the
were taking
canopy,
stock before the show and looking around and kind of
trying to
planning
figure out what
out.
I was going to do. Yeah. And
Mm. Okay. I
basically I
like
had
that.
a different canvas than I normally would have for painting my picture that night.
So the front of
And
house
that was what was
guy
cool.
the front of house guy from Onion, Marshall, who
Yeah.
may or may not be in this season or next season. I hope this season. Um, he has a very similar process in how he kind of maps out the room for sound before a show during sound check, where he's kind of moving from place to place and inspecting, like, you know, how the sound, in the same way as light reflects off of, we can
Right.
say, each surface in each area. So that's good to hear that you kind of take that prep time to like scope it
Oh, for
out.
sure. I
Um,
wanted to deliver, I wanted to give it my best, right? Because for me, that was the farthest I've traveled to do lights. That, and Munyon is by far the biggest band that I've been able to work with, fortunately. So, not that they created any pressure, but for myself, I was like, all right, the pressure's on. Like, you got to
sure.
nail this. You got to show them that this was worth it for them, so that we can continue to do work in the future. And it was a fantastic night, man. It was so great.
It honestly was. So I just wanted to say, like, to reiterate in case I didn't say it at the show, what it really impressed me about the show and about the lights in particular was not just the use of the settings, or the use of the setting, the what you did with the lights and the way that you were able to make those on the fly decisions and adjust to the variables of, I mean, biggest variable of all, weather, and it's
Yeah.
not very mild as far as wind goes. And there's always things that can happen. You know, I've seen them lit up by a lot of LDs, and there was something that was just unique about the arrangement of your lights. Um, as I recall, it was short strips up top, and then in between you had these really long LED columns.
Yep.
Yeah, and um, beams up top and on bottom. Um, and to me it was just a striking setup. I just hadn't seen anything like it before.
Thanks,
That's
man.
what. Yeah, hey, it was great. You responded well on the fly. You worked well with the changes in the band as they were playing. What more are you gonna ask for from?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
A
So that
band
kind of
like them, they make it easy, just with their lightheartedness on stage, the fun that they have, it creates an atmosphere that,
it's easy to get into that mood
it,
with them.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely I 100% get it. Um, I say way too often.
that's all right.
So that leads me on to my next topic is that you had mentioned to me that you had started out small. And I have been wanting to hear the story of how you got to that setup that impressed me so much that day when I saw Munyon.
Sure.
So please let us
So
know.
I've always been, try not to go too far back here, but always been in the music scene, right? Like, musician for years, just closet bedroom, play for myself. Love going to see live music. It's what I grew up doing with all my friends. It's still my favorite hobby of all time. But I've always wanted to be a part of it and something bigger. And, shout out again to Nate Purchase. I got my first taste of that when I was working with him. We had our podcast, but I also, I did booking for some bands and we threw some events together. And that's when I got my first taste in helping put on a show. Um,
Got it.
and then, I have my day job, full-time career, and that took priority for a few years and still is my priority. But, I got to ask myself, like, how do I go back to doing that? How do I keep pursuing that passion?
Well, what was it about that experience that hooked you so much?
Providing something for other people to enjoy, right? I am I'm a people pleaser. It's who I am as a friend. It's who I am as for people in my family. There's nothing greater than like bringing joy to people. Uh, just simply put, it's what makes me like it's what makes me want to wake up every day, right? Is like how can I impact people or bring people together? Um,
God,
so
I
that's
wish
that's
more
what hooked
people I
me on
wish
that.
more people had that attitude in life. That's wonderful. I mean, that's. That's exactly what the show is all about.
Right.
It's all
Um,
about, yeah.
that's what like live music is about too, right? Like think about all the people you probably know from live music and all the amazing people you've met, right? So that's all I want to do is contribute to that for other people mostly. Obviously it's like I do it for me too because I love it and it's really cool to be able to learn about this stuff as I go. But anyway, so on the other side of that, I've always been the kind of person that I make impulse decisions. I buy cool shit, like, I go to a music festival and then I get home and I'm like, man, I want one of them, really heady, levitation wands. So I'm going to buy one. That's kind of what
I'm
happened.
especially grateful for Tenacious Toys. This is
Yeah. So that's basically what happened with like, I bought a laser. And I knew I didn't want one of those like $30 Amazon lasers. I was looking at like, what do
no
I want
Timu
something
here.
cool for I want something cool for my bedroom, right? I've got the RGB strip lights everywhere, you know, that's what drove me to purchase my first light, and it was this laser. And when I bought it, I didn't even know like the capabilities behind how you can control something like that. I just had the little remote it came with, and I played around with it, and we turned the fog machine on. But anyway, so then one day comes along and I'm like, oh, I figured out that you can, if you have the right stuff, you can make the laser do what you want it to do. And from there,
So
it's like a light bulb clicked, no pun intended.
for our audience's sake, when you say laser, sure a lot of people think of like a handheld laser pointer or something like that. But in the context of being a light director, like it happens often. Like a lot of people watching the show might not know, like when you
Yeah,
say
for sure.
laser. So if you wouldn't mind elaborating on what that piece is and what attracted you to purchase that specifically, I think that would be really cool.
So when I say laser, and we are speaking in terms of like a low powered laser, I am not certified to operate high powered lasers at this point in my career yet. Um, just it's like a box, a big box with a mirror inside of it, and it produces images on your wall, right? Images that change color, images that move around. Um,
And how are you controlling that? From your
so at the
computer or
time when I first got it, it came with a little remote, and
okay.
in my head, I was like, I think this thing can do more than what these couple buttons do. So then
Mm,
I started looking into lights, and there's a protocol in lighting. It's the language that lights communicate with each other called DMX. Um, so I just kind of rabbit holed on the internet of like, how can I make this laser do what I want it to do specifically?
sure.
Which led me to my next few purchases of, well, if you want to see the beam across the room, which is in my opinion the cool part, you need a fog machine. So you got to
Right.
get a
You
good
need
fog
something
machine,
for the light to reflect off of.
right? The particles in the air.
Hmm.
Um, and then I needed to buy a controller for it. So I bought this, analog board with a bunch of faders on it, and just kind of taught myself that. And I found some free software on the internet, and everything that I do still to this day is all based on my computer. Um, a lot of professional touring light guys have, when I say console, but like a built-in all-in-one unit that controls everything. I'm not
Hmm.
quite there yet, so I make do with computer software and MIDI controllers.
Hey, buddy, I'm right
And
there with you.
right, and I mean, it works. I'm grateful that
Hey,
this is a thing. I'm grateful
we're
that I'm
doing
able to
it.
do this without.
You're clearly succeeding,
Yeah,
like it's working for you. I will say
sure.
that without a doubt. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks. But yeah, so I had the one laser, and I took the baby steps of learning how to make that laser do what I want it to do. And then I actually, a buddy hit me up. There's one of those Amazon resale stores in town where they get the freight shipments and, resell them for a good price or whatever. And,
Hmm.
it had been a pretty common thing at this point that people would come over and I'd bust the laser out and we'd live stream some music and we'd play with the laser. Um, but a buddy hit me up and said, hey man, there's these two lights here at this Amazon resale store that look like they move around and change colors and stuff. Is this something you might be interested in? And I said, yeah, that's really cool. I didn't realize that there was affordable, small versions of these things out there. um so then I purchased those, and then it was just a steep steep rabbit hole of well, shoot, if I have two, why not have four, or well, the living room's, pretty big. We could probably fit a couple more in there, and we can figure out if we can make the laser do
we
what you
have
want it
all
to
this
do.
we have all this space. We might as well fill it. I mean, what's the
Yeah.
point of having the space if there's nothing there? I feel the exact same way.
So my goal at that time, I still hadn't even considered doing lights in a live setting for anything. All I wanted was the ultimate music streaming living room space. I wanted to emulate the feel of a concert in my living room so we could all live stream our favorite bands and I could do light shows with it. That was my intention. And that's what I did for a little while, right? And I'd invite, we'd have the friends over and I would try to impress them with the things I learned that week or whatever. um and then, and fortunately, really fortunately for me, my good friend here in Muskegon owns a brewery. He had seen what I'd been doing online and he just kind of messaged me and said, hey, why don't we throw a show and you bring those lights to the brewery. And that's really where it all started.
It's so cool that it's so cool how it happens like that, where you just kind of get a call
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden um we had an interview earlier this season with Sean Bayous, who did a poster for Pearl Jam.
Nice.
And he was just chilling out at his booth at Decon, and their manager came up to him and was like, "We like your art. We want you to do a poster for us." And he was like, "Sweet, like
Yeah.
rock and roll, like rock and roll. Let's go." Like I've never done a gig print before. And I asked him, I was like, "Would you do it again?" He's like, "Oh hell yeah, it was fun. Like it
Right.
was like I would love to do it again." Like one of the things that people don't understand as much, and I really would love to hear your thoughts on this, because this is something I've heard over and over again from guests on the show, is that now a festival is a little different, but for the average concert, the audience that's showing up at 8 o'clock door time don't know that y'all have been there since noon doing the sound check, prepping the lights, getting everything set up, getting the cables down, maybe eating lunch,
If you're
like
lucky.
if you're right, if you're lucky, right? And like and that's really one of the reasons that I love this platform is because my friends who are second talent, who are that overlooked, right? Because I always say like if secondhand talent are doing their job right, no one knows we're there, right?
Right.
Like some of the hardest working people I know. Like watch them work and I'm consistently amazed and impressed with the quality and the consistency of their output. And sometimes I just wonder, I'm like, how is it possible that they get it right every time? And like I might say afterwards, like, ah, I should have, but it's like for me in the moment, there's always coulda, shoulda, woulda. But
Always.
like
Always.
from from that other perspective, man,
Yeah. No, I mean, I there's so much work that goes into it and none of that came as a shock to me because I'd kind of gotten my feet wet with Nate before. And I actually did get to see, and I've always been a techie kind of guy. I've always been interested, even as a young kid seeing concerts. I've always been interested in the live sound part of it. And you know just everything that goes behind the scenes to put a show on. I remember volunteering for my first stagehand gig at the Orbit Room in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We did the Pink Floyd experience from Canada, and I
nice.
was like, man, that's a ton of work, and there's a bunch of us here. And then the guy's like, yeah, be back here at 12:30 tonight for teardown. And I was 16 or 17, and I was just like, shit, I gotta come back here and do this all again for
I
$10 an
remember
hour,
I remember
like,
working my first trade show and just being like, I don't know what I'm trying to do in my life, but this ain't it.
yeah,
Like,
no, for sure. And
mm-mm, mm-mm.
I had I admittedly was like, man, that sucked kind of, and so
What was the
it's
first experience you had where, you know what you're going into, but you came out the other side of it and you were like, this is why I do what I do.
honestly, I mean, that kind of stems back all, even back from like having my podcast and stuff. But like that, when we had Munyon on the show, I walked away from that feeling like, all right, all your
Mhm.
hard work's, it's going somewhere, it's paying off. And that's because I get to interview people that I looked up to, and as a guitar player, like Justin was always somebody that I was like blown away by, and wish I could play that good. So, but as far as in like the lighting world, my first time doing an actual show, um we did like a EDM DJ night at the brewery. And I was nervous. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it. I didn't know if I had, I had a lot of what do they call it? Imposter syndrome, you know,
You
like,
know, we could talk about it later, but I know exactly that is well, you can talk about that is exactly how I felt once the podcast really started getting downloaded and listened to and watched. And I was like, I was asking certain people to be on the show, and everybody that I have on the show are people I look up to in one way or another. And some people, admittedly, are, I hold in extremely high regard, for what they do, what they have done, the careers that they've had. And I am consistently I always feel surprised and happy when anybody says yes to being on the show.
right.
Because for me, I know how hard it is doing what everybody's doing individually and doing it day in and day out, and that they're going to carve some time out to do this silly little thing with me is, very kind.
I mean, it's a testament though, right? Like, even the people that we look up to that do it and have been doing it for a living, like they probably all remember that feeling too, of like getting started, and the people that were there that believed in them, and the people that asked them for their first interview and stuff. And there's the music scene, especially like the you know
Is this your first interview?
no, well, for lighting, yes, this is my
Okay,
first
fans.
interview.
All
um
right.
Cheers. I don't have a little soda pop here.
Cheers.
But yeah, things just come full circle, I think, for everyone sometimes, for the people that really put their passion and hearts behind it. And that's what really makes it all worth doing. um
Did you kind of have that full circle feeling like from that podcast moment that you just talked about to right after that show that we were at?
yeah, I mean, I still have that pinch me I'm dreaming feel with, like getting the first money gig. Like, so not to sidetrack, after doing the first couple like gigs at the brewery, I'm fortunate. I have a lot of friends in the Michigan music scene, that are still at that small regional, level. Um, that's when I kind of started to spread my wings with it, and travel with my lights, and, offer
Like
something to these
the
bands that don't
Grand
necessarily always have
Rapids,
it.
Kalamazoo kind of
Grand
area?
Rapids, Ann Arbor. I've got a lot of friends out there. The
Sure.
Stormy Cromer, Pajamas, Chirp, all those guys are all good friends of mine, um, which opened a door for me to be able to line some work up with them. And that's where I really started to gain some confidence in my ability to do this. And once I
Mm.
had that, I decided, I should invest some more time, money, and effort into making this even bigger and better. And so that's when I did. And then, um, I wish I remembered what the first conversation I had with money and about doing lights was. I think I just shot my shot. I'd known Justin well enough at that point to be comfortable just shooting him a message. I knew he'd reply, but um, I think I just shot my shot and told him if they ever wanted to have me do lights, that I'd be more than honored. And I still, that first time, that first show in Lansing at Max Bar, I couldn't believe that it was actually happening. I used to pay money to go see these guys, and I still would any day. um, buy a ticket and go see a show because that's how awesome their music is. But that just that moment really was like the full circle. Like, okay, I think I'm where I'm supposed to be right now. You know, I think these efforts aren't for naught. They're it's good. You know, there's a reason I'm here doing this right now. So
I would, based on my experience at the show, um, like I said, I've known them since they've been a band.
right,
Um, I've seen many people light them up. I don't think I've ever seen them in that specific kind of setting. And like I said, the light configuration that you used, I thought was very well put together and unique, which
thank you, man.
is,
Well, you got to
you
be
know,
too. You know, like how am I?
you got to stand
How do you
out in
stand
some
out?
way.
Right.
Well, so I still those pillar lasers, like that's my those are
The
awesome.
the LED
Those impress,
bars.
yeah, those bars, those impressed me a lot. And it I would say that you made the right call.
Thanks, man.
It definitely appeared to me that you're in the right place. Um, it sounds like, you've also, the same way that I would say that about the podcast, putting your money where your mouth is, you clearly have gone down the same path. And that's one of the most the full circle metaphor is a really great one because that's one of the most important feelings you could have is that sense of accomplishment and not like I'm contributing something that's meaningful. And not necessarily like for the appreciation, but just for the sake of like loving what you do and
Yeah.
being like, this is cool and I love tweaking it and I love changing things. Like it's, for the love of the game, so to
Yes.
speak.
That's why I specifically like, you know, I'll definitely take on any gig that comes my way, but working with bands that heavily improv, you know, jam
Mm.
bands
Yeah.
is like the most fun because I also get to like flex my creativity with
So
them.
you
You know
enjoy
what
the
I mean?
technical side of it just as much as like
Yeah.
the color of the lights.
I love, you know, I challenge myself, especially with a band like Munyon or any of the bands I've worked with, Chirp, Stormy Cromer, Pajamas. They're all very, you know, they all have their own sound, but they're all very talented technical musicians. And I challenge myself to match that, you know, intensity where I can in a tasteful way with how I decide to run the light show. I was just gonna say, like, you know, there you have to it's still hard and still something I'm trying to learn how to do of like they call it flash and trash in the lighting community from what I've learned so far. Like you can't just rely on the strobes every time the music gets intense, right? But it's really easy to go to that, right? It's easy because it looks awesome. And so when you tastefully do it and you do it in the right moment, like I feel like it helps take the peak of the music even higher, you know?
If you want
Um,
to see a great example of that, watch some of the videos of the recent United Center run from Fish. Kuroda is a household name, for if you're a Fish fan anyway. And I mean, he's referred to as CK5, the fifth member of the band. Um, and of course, like I'm constantly impressed with his light show.
oh, it's
Um,
he's bar none, like he's, you know, he's every lighting designer's favorite lighting designer, you
but
know?
well, so and even when I interviewed Ellis Goddard last season from Mockingbird Foundation, even he like his answers like, oh yeah, I don't know, it's secondhand talent in the context of your show, like that's Chris. Um, and my like perception of how great of an LD he is has nothing to do with the flashiness. It's about the muted moments. Like it'll peak in part of Harry Hood and it'll just be flat blue with
Hmm.
the lights. Like nothing crazy happening. And somehow it just makes it more intense.
Yeah.
And he has this incredible, like getting back to that notion of the synergistic relationship between the band and the LD. He just has this really special awareness of how to facilitate a buildup
Oh, for
and
sure.
how to truly use the lack of effects that are at his disposal to make the most bold statement that he can. And,
Very
the
well
less,
said. Yeah.
and that's and like that's to well, that to me is what makes him such a great LD, is that understanding of how the music flows and how the light flows with it. So when you talk about that relationship, of who drives who or what drives what, the band or the lights, the music or the LD, um, I would say that it goes both ways.
For sure. I
Like
mean,
there's no there's no way to say it's one way or the other. It's a mutual shared experience.
absolutely. And I mean, you can 100% have those moments of musical frisson where you get chills on your spine at a show where there's no lights at all. Um, because like we're fortunate to live in a time with such amazing musicians out there putting their heart and soul into what they do. So it's definitely interesting in that aspect of like you can do a lot with a little. And I'm still learning. I'm very new to this still, and every time I do this, I learn something new, which
You
is
and
the
me
beautiful
both.
part about it.
I'll probably learn something editing this episode.
For sure.
I'll
But
learn to
that's
have
I
a
mean
tissue
that's
before
the
the show.
challenge for myself. Is just like how do I say more? How do I do more with while doing less at the same time?
Well, the
It's
example you gave of the laser you bought at the very beginning and having this notion of, diving back to the beginning of the interview a little bit, this notion of I have this thing, it's doing this, but I think it can do more, in your words, I
Yep,
believe. That that's lateral thinking. That's not, I have this, like, how do I get something bigger and better? That's, I have this, how do I get the maximum capacity utilization out of
right.
what I have? And personally, I think that is truly the what drives success is not having the most expensive stuff. It's being able to utilize what you have in the highest fashion.
Absolutely. Um, the lighting world is an expensive one, and
Mm.
I've learned a lot. I used to be just naive to how it all worked, and most touring bands they rent the lights because no band can afford 150 $4,000 lights. So coming into it from my world of like, well, how do I do this with no funding, no capital? I don't work for any one band. There's not one band funding this whole thing. So what do I, it's been a lot of trial and error. I bought a lot of lights that didn't quite do what I needed them to do or didn't behave the way that would lend to being able to provide a light show in a live setting. And I've learned a lot along the way of what does and doesn't work. And at a certain point, I'm limited again to what I have. So the best thing I can do is use them to their maximum capabilities, right? And try to, I use them as a tool to express my art instead of just relying on the light itself to do the job. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
It does. And I can't exactly relate to it on the equipment level because, like, I know how to use this stuff in the same way that, like, a monkey knows how to peel a banana. Like, somebody
Right.
showed me one time and now I remember it. Like, I have to get it done to make this show happen. So I know how to do it. I
Right.
don't really, like, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm certain there is more that I can do with the equipment that I have.
Sure.
And maybe when I'm done with production on season 3, I'll get some lessons in on how to really properly utilize it. But I'm certain that there's more that I could. We're on Zoom. I'm sure like I know there's other things out there. I don't give say names because no free ads, but um
It's, I mean, like anything, it's a rabbit hole, right? And, even
it's
just in the
it's
recording
it's
side of things,
it's if but it's how much you believe in what you're doing too.
right. Oh, for
and
sure.
and it's the setup that you had just to be clear for our attendees who weren't for sorry for listeners and viewers who were not attendees at this show. There's not a small amount of lights that were on this stage. So I just like would like to like make it very clear that like when Eric's talking about lighting is an expensive world. Like the way that I knew when he told it to me that he had built it up bit by bit that was true is because looking at the equipment, I'm familiar with some different kinds of lighting equipment, and I can kind of see like what stage you're at with what level of equipment you're using.
For sure.
And so like this part was at okay, like you could kind of see the sequence if you know like enough about the gear and it's not a cheap setup. Like
No,
it's there's nothing about what you had going on that was corner cutting or like you know slide trying to slide one by or anything like that. Like it was all like
yeah, and I want to also make sure I'm not coming like I that by no means is like a flex of anything either. Like,
no,
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 my
no, no.
entire
That
my entire
yeah.
rig is budget with what I've been able to put together, and I'm just so grateful for all the opportunities I've had to be able to make some money doing this and being able to put it right back into the setup to
You know,
keep
my
growing it.
Yeah, no, my point was that if it got misstated, was that like you could clearly see the time and investment put into the project
Thank
and
you.
that
Yeah,
and it's like it like you could tell that it wasn't somebody who just bought a bunch of lights at once.
sure. Yeah, no,
That's
I
that's kind
appreciate
of I
that.
think that's what how I intended
Yeah,
to
yeah, no,
express
yeah,
it
all
is that
good.
like it you could clearly see it like because I was standing by the stage and I had been there all day.
Right.
So, I rolled in at like, 2 or 3 o'clock.
Yeah,
Um, so, I had time to, see everything in operation. And, you could clearly tell, like, if you're looking up close at the equipment, what's older, what's newer.
oh, for sure.
Like it's not that because, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you're buying equipment like that, in stages, it's we're talking about over years, not necessarily month to month buying new
Yeah, for the
pieces.
most part, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, this all started 2 years ago. So there have been some purchases that I've made probably a little hastily out of excitement for myself, because I just want to always be able to, well, and you learn as you go, right? Like you do a gig and then you're like, wow, life would be a lot easier if I had this instead. So then you set a goal and you say, well, this is what I want to get next to make my life a little bit easier. Um, even just like the stands for the right lights, right? Like that gig I met you at was the first time I had cranks to actually raise up my
Oh,
truss.
wow.
Before
Really?
before that, I had always like asked for four people to help me just like freaking tear up my shoulders and hope things don't fall over, and that's how I got by for the first year. And then I didn't even know the crank stands existed at a affordable level, and then I found some and was like, oh, okay, that changes the game entirely for me. So it's just like it's a never ending game of that kind of thing of just like, how do I make this a little bit easier and a little bit better each time? And I would be remiss if I didn't have an opportunity to say that I could not do this without the help of the people that have helped me along the way. My wonderful girlfriend's been in my corner through all of this. Um, you know, I don't want to call it a crazy idea, but from this crazy idea I had one day. She's been there, she's come to gigs, she's carried the things, she's, you know, how can I help you? And I couldn't do it without her. And then
I
really,
feel the exact same way about my wife in this project. I know.
really excited
That's awesome, man.
to be able to bring my best friend into the fold with me. Pat, shout out to Pat Temple. He's officially the second member of Pixelate Productions, and I've been able to take him on some gigs, and he's learning from the ground up with me. And um,
Nice.
he comes from a programming, like, engineering kind of background, so he's even been able to help me look at things differently when in terms of programming lights. And it's been a really cool collaborative process, and I wouldn't be where I'm at without them and all the other countless friends that have helped me carry lights or helped me hold up the truss, or you know whatever people have done for me. I couldn't do it without them, because it takes a village sometimes. But
Yeah, I mean it's funny that you say that because that's kind of one of the ways that I describe the show to people is that it takes a village to put on a concert. And,
oh yeah.
the band are just a few. We interview the rest of the villagers besides the band.
And that's why
Um,
this show's so cool. I love what you're doing here. I think it's really cool to shine a light and give some recognition that sometimes people don't get enough of.
yeah, a message that I like to deliver in as many episodes as I can is that like when you're at a show, like if you see the merch person or the door guy or the audio guy or the light director, give him a smile and a wave, say thanks. Like it
For
goes a
sure.
long, long way. Like a little bit of appreciation. No one's putting out like a pot and asking you to throw cash in it. Just like wave and a smile and say thanks and thanks for being a part of a great time and sharing that experience. It goes such a long way.
It certainly does.
That's
It
part of the
certainly does.
goal of this podcast is to raise up the profile not just of the guests who are on the show, but of the areas of service which they represent. So it's bringing awareness, obviously to the guests that are on the show, but more importantly, it's bringing awareness to there's one light director, there's more. If there's one stage manager, it's a whole, you know, it's a whole ecosystem
For sure.
that the typical consumer of live music is really not probably too well versed on.
For sure.
um, and raising that knowing so many people who are in those roles and having been in so many of those roles myself and knowing how hard, my friends work. I feel like they deserve to be, have their stories told and, you know, let them be the ones it shouldn't be me just talking into a microphone or into a camera and telling other people's stories. Like it's about bringing other people on and having a dialogue with them and learning new things from each other.
I mean, I guess the cool and beautiful part about that is, like, you're providing that for the secondhand talent, like the secondhand talent provides for the band. You know what I mean? Like, it's really cool. It's just a cool thing, I guess, that you got going on here, and I think it's awesome, man.
I appreciate that. And on the note of that wonderful compliment, I think that's about all the time we've got left for today. So on behalf of everyone here at Secondhand Talent, and by that I mean myself and Steiner, I want to say thank you so much. Eric, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. It's been great, and hopefully we can chat again soon in the future.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Secondhand Talent. Yeah, we'll see you next Wednesday, actually. Sorry. I always get that mixed up. I'll see them next Wednesday. You won't. So
But they'll see you.
yes, yeah, that's what I was saying. I forgot who is. It's confusing sometimes.
Oh,